Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. It's Mock Draft Monday and I'm so excited. The first Monday after the conclusion of the regular season. You know what that means? We've got a lot of off-season content coming up. We've got the postseason here. We've got a lot of exciting NBA content to break down, including your guys' favorite NBA mock drafts as well. I'm super excited. I hope you guys are as well. If you do enjoy the content, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content. Let's not waste any more time and jump into this 2024 NBA mock draft here at Utility Sports. And with the first overall pick, we have the Detroit Pistons. For this mock draft, I'm going based off of the standings. So the worst team in the league, yet again, the Detroit Pistons. But Pistons fans, don't worry. There's a couple of things to look forward to. First of all, the Detroit Lions are great. So if you're from Michigan, if you're a Detroit fan in general, you've got the Lions to root for. That's a huge W in the chat there for Lions fans. But when it comes to the Pistons, there's still a lot to be excited about. I think Cade Cunningham had a really good season. I know obviously the wins didn't come around and the Monty Williams thing looks like a disaster. I understand that, but I think the Pistons are moving in the right direction, at least with Cade Cunningham. Jaden Ivey showed a good deal of flashes, especially when Cade was out. I think with the right coach and the right coaching, you could probably maximize those two guys to a certain extent. I think there's some real pieces here for Detroit to build upon, but there were some regression points as well. Jalen Duren looked like he took a step backward defensively this season. That obviously is a cause for concern. I think that again has to do with the coaching and the scheme that they were put into. But here for Detroit, picking first overall is pretty much a big challenge. You can go based off of fit, you can go based off of talent. I think with Detroit, I myself would pick for talent at this spot in the draft, especially first overall. But I do think in this mock draft, it's important to go with who I think the team will actually select in this situation. And given some of the pressure in the organization under Gores and obviously Troy Weaver, I think there's going to be a real flame under his seat. The seat's getting quite warm there in Detroit. So I think he's going to value winning and taking a player who's going to help that by implementing fit. So first overall, I have the Detroit Pistons going with Zaccharie Risacher out of France. Now the shooting's been up and down, especially a little bit more down lately, but he's got a lot of the tools that you're looking for when you're evaluating a wing prospect who is going to be predominantly an off-ball player. And I think given Detroit's team context, you have your primary pick and roll ball handler in Cade Cunningham. You have your primary screen setter already in Jalen Duren. Those two guys I think are going to form a really unique, dynamic offensive combination. You have Jaden Ivey as another secondary ball handler. And then Risacher really slots in as your wing spacer, wing shooter. Now, last year they went with Sarr Thompson, 5th overall. I think he's got a ton of potential to live up into, but clearly shooting is not one of those areas where he's going to become a really high-quality player in that regard. So Risacher, a different prospect here. He's lengthy, though. He's flashed on the defensive film as well. Now, you're not going to get someone who I think has all NBA potential here. I don't think Risacher is going to ever live up to that, just because I don't think he does enough with the ball in his hands. I don't think his skill set really plays into that type of quality of player, but he could be a really high-end play finisher. And I think looking at where the NBA is at, everyone loves to kind of flaunt the percentage unassisted buckets, like how many tough buckets is this guy generating. Think about Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a couple of examples of that. And yes, those players have super immense talents and they're just really great players. But players like Lauri Markkanen, who over 80% of his shots and field goals this year have actually been assisted. So those types of players, while they're maybe not the highest end potential, they actually are very valuable, and it really helps play around other talented players. So I think Risacher is someone who's going to be more of a scoring off of assisted chances rather than unassisted opportunities. But I think for Detroit's team context, that is extremely important. Again, not necessarily the pick I would make here, but I think given the kind of pressure on the organization right now, I think Troy Weaver is going to value fit over upside and talent. And for that reason, Risacher goes first overall in this 2024 NBA mock draft. Before the next pick, I actually have a special shout out I have to make. Shout out to Sports Junkie, one of the viewers here on the channel for a long time, actually one of the moderators in our Discord. SJ is the NBA Pick'em champion for our 2023-2024 season with an astounding 823 wins, 411 losses. That is a crazy record. He participated in all 158 nights of the NBA season. So huge shout out to him. And for those of you in the Discord, you might know him a little bit better as On My Knees Worshiping Tim Tebow. That's a little bit of a backstory. If you guys haven't joined the Discord already, you're going to want to join that. We've got a lot of fun stuff going on, including playoff pick'em, where you could win a special championship tag and a special shout out here on YouTube as well. So again, shout out to Sports Junkie, aka On My Knees Worshiping Tim Tebow. Really appreciate you for everything you do in the Discord. And again, what a spectacular run. Then we move on to number 2, and we've got the Washington Wizards here. What a season for Washington. There are a few things that I think we learned about this team, though. Jordan Poole, last couple of weeks of the season, really started to play better with the basketball in his hands. Washington, we also learned that this team needs defensive help. They are not good defensively, and trading Daniel Gafford didn't help either. This team now has a significant hole, a significant flaw in their front court. But luckily for them, there's a player in this draft who I think is worth taking in the top 2 that will be able to hopefully at some point solve some of those issues, and not only solve them, but maybe become an identity piece for a good NBA defense. And that player here, second overall for the Washington Wizards, is Alex Sarr out of Perth, playing for the Perth Wildcats this year in the NBL. The year prior, he spent time in Overtime Elite, obviously the program that has produced multiple pro players now. You think Dominic Barlow, you think the Thompson twins, Rob Dillingham also spent some time with the Cold Hearts. So there's a lot of talent coming out of those Overtime Elite developmental programs. They're doing a great job. And Alex Sarr is a player who he flashes in a lot of the areas, and he has some real traits that makes you believe he's going to be very, very good in some ways. Now, my lazy comp for him has been Jaren Jackson Jr. He's not a Jaren Jackson Jr. clone, but he's got some of the same kind of qualities about him. He's a tweener big man. He's not really a true center. He's not really a true power forward. He does a little bit of both, so it makes it hard to figure out how to build around him. That'll be a flaw that Washington would have to figure out at some point around him. But I think given where Washington's at in their rebuild, they don't have any real key core pieces. Now, Avdija is a big part. Vucevic is a big part, of course. He's been playing kind of crazy the last couple of weeks, including an insane behind-the-back pass, which was awesome to see. Corey Kispert, I think, could be a long-term staying piece there in Washington as a shooter. But Sarr would really be the first step forward in the rebuild. Obviously, Bilal Coulibaly they took last year, but Sarr, your first top 3, top 4 pick in this new regime, you have to hit on it. I think Sarr's a very safe selection because worst case, he's going to turn into a good NBA defender in my eyes. And then secondly, there's some shot creation upside, and he's huge, lengthy, athletic. So you're getting a lot of positive traits that can really build into winning basketball on both ends of the floor if you're Washington. Moving on to pick number 3 now, we have the Portland Trailblazers. And Scoot Henderson, don't look now, but everything I told you he was going to be is starting to look like it down the last couple of weeks of the season. Now, April basketball isn't always the best way to evaluate players, but it's great to see, especially for a rookie point guard, him taking some of those steps forward as not only a facilitator, but in his aggression as a scorer as well. Really finished the season on a few high notes down the stretch of the year, and I think that's going to help build his confidence going into year 2 of his career. And Portland's now got an opportunity to build up some talent around him. They have 2 picks in the lottery in this draft. It's very important for Portland to hit on both of these. They need to turn both of these players into quality players that fit their team, fit their identity that they're looking to build. And the first one here is forward Cody Williams. And I think if I'm looking at Portland right now, I think they need a lot more shooting. Cody Williams doesn't necessarily give you that. They do have another lottery pick, though, so we'll come back and look to address shooting at that point. I think this is a big-time upside swing pick here. He's got NBA length, athleticism, and he drives the basketball extremely well. If you look at his percentile ranks as a finisher around the rim, not only does he get to the rim on good volume, but he also is very efficient at finishing at the rim at the college game as a true freshman. He was a key part for the Buffaloes this past year. And obviously at times, kind of faded in and out of games, kind of what you would expect from a true freshman. But he was fantastic in transition, fantastic as a downhill slasher, and he didn't shoot a ton of threes, but when he did, he was super efficient on those looks, had a very good true shooting percentage when it came to unguarded catch and shoot threes. Now I know that sounds like, oh, whatever. I'm talking like 90th plus percentile. He was extremely efficient as a catch and shoot shooter on open looks. So even though it's not enough volume to make me say, wow, Cody Williams is the no-brainer number 1, number 2 pick, whatever in this draft, I think justification for taking him third here is we've seen him succeed as a shooter. Now we just need that volume to ramp up and keep that confidence high as he continues to develop in that area. And he's already got a lot of the other skills as a ball handler, a downhill attacker, and he's been efficient in those areas as well. So I think Cody Williams is a player who has a ton of upside, a ton of potential yet to untap. And I think Portland, given the direction of their rebuild, they're in a spot where taking him makes a ton of sense. Pick number 4, we're looking at the Charlotte Hornets here. Remember last year they took Brandon Miller. He had a great rookie season. So I know people are going to say, oh, you hated Brandon. I had him 4th on my board. I still think that Scoot Henderson and Amen Thompson have higher potential, and I would still bet on them moving forward. But I did have Brandon Miller with all NBA potential. You can go back to my final big board last year and look at it. I think there's been a little bit of misunderstanding there from Hornets fans, but he was great this year. He's going to finish all rookie first team deservingly. And I think the Hornets now are in a spot where they get to build up and still take something that they were missing last draft even that I wanted them to select. And part of the reason why I was so on board with them taking Scoot Henderson was they needed more downhill attack. They needed more rim pressure. They needed someone who can get paint touches off the bounce. They're getting that here. 4th overall, they select Ron Holland out of G League Ignite. I just think he is a player who fits what Charlotte is missing currently. Someone who is an aggressive downhill rim attacker, and sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. He is probably going to be pretty turnover prone in his career early on. He's probably going to force himself playing into traffic. He's kind of got some of that Jaylen Brown, Cam Whitmore to him, where sometimes he's a little out of control and you don't know if he's reading the weak side of the floor at all. You don't even know if he's got his eyes open. But there have been a lot of flashes, not only from an athletic standpoint, which is really good, but defensively, he's just got a little bit of a tenacity about him, especially when it comes to getting to the basketball, and he plays an aggressive style, and then offensively, that translates as well. He initiates contact, he hunts contact. I think he's going to shoot a good number of free throws, and I think looking at Charlotte, they've got some finesse players right now in LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, who has shown a little bit of punch and power this year, but mostly finesse. I think getting Holland in there gives you kind of a healthy dose of something that they're lacking right now, and that is some of that power element, that rim pressure, that finishing through contact, and really looking to, initiate some of that contact is something I think Charlotte still needs, and they're getting a dog on the defensive end of the floor, even though there's room for him to grow definitely there. I think he's got the tenacity about him that you can bet on some of those characteristics moving forward. Pick number 5, we look at the San Antonio Spurs here. What a rookie season from Victor Wembanyama. He's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, and people told me I was crazy when I said he was an all-star caliber player in his rookie year. People told me I'd be out of my mind when I said he was going to average over 20 points a game as a rookie. They all thought I was crazy. Well, he did it. The Spurs are in a great spot. Honestly, I'm jealous of San Antonio Spurs fans. Getting to watch Wembanyama every single night as a true fan of that team is just great. I can't take my eyes off the screen when I've got San Antonio on. They're one of my favorite teams to watch now because of Victor. And obviously, I like some of the other players there too. Vassell, I think Sohan really started to figure things out the second half of the year, and maybe even a little bit before the All-Star break as well. Obviously Popovich set him up in a way that they were going to push his development in a few unique ways. Didn't go quite great for him, but I still think we saw a good amount of improvement from San Antonio compared to where they were at the start of the year to where they finished the season. That's really all you can hope for. So 5th overall, I have them taking guard Nikola Topic. This pick I really struggled with. I looked at a few different areas. For me, I would have really loved to grab someone who can really shoot the basketball, but given Wembanyama's skill set, I couldn't pass on the opportunity here for San Antonio to grab one of the best passing guards in the draft, if not the best passing guard in the draft, someone who is a savant with the basketball in his hands, understands how to read the defense, not only the strong side, not only the weak side, but he's really great at the mesh point as well. If you get him into pick and roll action, he understands what he's facing and what he's going up against. He understands if he's going to get blitz. He knows how to turn the corner. He knows how to fit a pocket pass in. He knows how to set up screens to find success and open up space. I think he's got a better first step than most people give him credit for. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but I think he wins with quickness. And honestly, his change of pace is really the big thing behind that as well. So for San Antonio, the upside here for Topic is that you get one of the better floor generals in the league at some point who can set up Wembanyama for success, be that dynamic pick and roll point guard partner with him that is going to really set up a ton of future scoring opportunities and advantage opportunities, because if teams try and cheat in on Wemby, which they're going to, Topic has the skill set to spray it to the opposite corner, open up looks for others, and I think it's going to really lead to a lot of easier opportunities for San Antonio's offense, which is very pass heavy, very team oriented. I think Topic fits into all of that as well. Moving on to the 6th pick, and this is a really important selection to watch between now and the day of the NBA draft lottery, because the Raptors sit exactly at pick number 6. Some of their tanking down the stretch of the season has really helped position them here for the 6th overall selection. Remember, this is a top 6 protected pick, so if it falls to number 7, it will be going to San Antonio, which means if one team behind pick 6 jumps up into the top 4, Toronto is conveying this pick out to San Antonio. Really interesting situation, one we have to definitely keep our eyes on but in this draft cycle. But 6th overall, I think the Raptors are still in an interesting spot. They get to have a real good shot here at adding some good talent, and they're going to draft a winner, someone who I could really see Masai Ujiri taking. That is guard Stephon Castle, 6th overall. He just had a fantastic run in the NCAA tournament. Just a winner, I think, is the best way to describe him. But when it comes down to actually evaluating him as a prospect, there's a lot of things to like that most people probably don't notice or don't always appreciate about him when it comes to how he impacts winning. First of all, he's a really smart player when it comes to being on or off the basketball. On the ball, I don't think he ever is really trying to do too much. I don't think he plays outside of himself, and it doesn't sound like wow, that's such a great compliment for a top 6 pick. That means a lot. Honestly, a lot of team and player flaws in the NBA are players who aren't able to just play within their identity, play within their skill set. Castle does that all of the time. I also think he's going to grow as a unique screen option, where he's going to be really great if you hit him on little slips and short rolls. You hit him in the middle of the floor, because he's got playmaking capabilities. He's got a really electric handle that I think if his jump shot comes around a bit, that's really where you're going to see him take that big next step. But a player I could see him kind of growing into a comp for is Derek White. He's not going to be as good as Derek White, because Derek White's a really, really darn good player, but he's got unique point of attack defensive capabilities. He navigates screens really well. He's got the length and size. He's got the want to. A big part of his recruitment to UConn was his desire to win. He wanted to go to a team poised to win, and he went to the national champions and helped them win another one. So I think there's a lot to like. He's also got really good physical strength and balance control for his size. He works off the dunker spot well. He's going to hit the offensive glass. He's just a really dynamic player who can do a little bit of everything, especially when you're a team like Toronto, where you're trying to figure out how to piece this thing together after a few big trades this season. Taking someone like Castle, who probably is a Swiss Army knife, fills a few different roles for you, he's going to be a really nice mesh piece that helps Toronto move forward. Pick 7. We've got the Memphis Grizzlies here. A real down year from them. Obviously the injuries, Ja Morant, Steven Adams being out and then traded. Brandon Clark missed most of the year. Really good to see him get back on the court at the end of the season here. And then, Desmond Bane missed a good deal of time. Marcus Smart missed a good deal of time. This Memphis Grizzlies team is going to sneak back up on people next year, though, because the talent's still there, especially when Ja Morant is on the floor. So instead of going with the guard, instead of going high upside here, which maybe this player that we're taking does have some good upside, I do believe in their upside a bit, I think the best thing is to draft based off of fit here. Draft a player who is ready to help you win. contribute to winning. And that player, 7th overall for the Memphis Grizzlies, is Buzelis from G League Ignite. The final year of the G League Ignite program, definitely going to be an interesting one to keep our eyes on with this draft. Obviously, you got the unique prospect situation. We'll talk about that in future videos, not in this mock draft. But Buzelis here, 7th overall for Memphis, I think gives them a dynamic wing who you can see either play the 4 or the 3. I think that's important as well. We talked about how Jaren Jackson Jr. is a little bit of a tweener earlier in this mock draft. Well, Buzelis, playing him at the 4 next to Jaren at the 5, maybe gives you a little bit more offensive punch than we're accustomed to seeing out of Memphis. But defensively, if you play him at the 3 with Jaren at the 4 and your prototypical traditional center at the 5, Memphis could still be a really strong rebounding team, defensive-minded team. Buzelis works really well off the baseline. He's a good player off of the catch. He attacks closeouts well. I think one thing for him is probably getting away from his back-to-the-basket game. He does it quite a bit. He relies on it pretty heavily. I think for him, if he can turn into more of a straight line player, a little bit better off the catch even than he currently is, you could see him get to all new levels. I think that'll be important in his development there in Memphis. But this might be a golden opportunity for the Grizzlies, a team that, listen, they've been really good for a long time, especially given how good Ja Morant's played for them since being drafted there. They haven't had opportunities to draft in the top 10 very frequently. So they need to hit on it. I think Buzelis is a very good pick for them and one that just makes good, logical sense at this spot of the draft. Pick number 8, we have the Utah Jazz here on the board. And for Utah specifically, when you look at Danny Ainge, I think typically you're going to think wing or talented big man, someone who has some size to him. But he also knows talent when he sees it. He was one of the biggest believers in Isaiah Thomas. And if a player's small, it's not going to scare him away from potentially adding him onto his roster. That player here, 8th overall, is Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky, one of the most electric players in this entire draft, and a player who I'm a big-time believer in, was extremely efficient coming off the bench for Kentucky. And I was thinking about it today, kind of reminded me of Devin Booker a little bit. Now, obviously, they're not even close to the same player, but I was just talking about coming off the bench, being a great college player, and really translating into an awesome NBA player. And I think Dillingham has a lot of those qualities. He's got the shot creation diet. He's got the ability to play make out of the pick and roll. I think that's one of the most underrated discussion points right now in the entire NBA draft class. People look at Rob Dillingham as a pure scorer. He's an elite pick and roll ball handler as well. Ranked very, very well in college as a pick and roll maestro, someone who you can have run your offense. And I think for Utah, they obviously gave the ropes to Keyonte George a bit this year. While I think Keyonte George took some big steps forward, Rob Dillingham's a better point guard. He's a better player, and I think Rob Dillingham would be the future of the Utah Jazz if they select him 8th overall. I'm a big believer in his game. I'm a big believer in his talent, his shot making, and his ability to process and read a floor. He's great in transition. I think if he gets a little bit better at the rim, not even a lot better, just a little bit better at the rim, he could become this really dynamic scoring threat on multiple levels that with his burst, speed, and handle, you're looking at a really dangerous player going 8th overall here to Utah. Pick number 9, we move on to the Houston Rockets, and I'm sure some Rockets fans would have loved to see Rob Dillingham there in Houston. Remember, this pick comes from the Brooklyn Nets, so the Rockets have a great opportunity here to maybe even move up in the lottery. You never know what happens. Obviously, lottery night can go crazy. We'll see what happens with Houston. But they need to add some shooting. That was one of the big flaws. They need someone who can play off of the basketball at a very high level. And luckily for them, someone is out here that does that at a really good clip. 9th overall, I have the Houston Rockets selecting Reed Sheppard out of Kentucky. Back-to-back Wildcats guards go off the board, and Reed Sheppard to Houston is one of my favorite mock selections because he is the exact type of guard that they could use. Someone who can toggle between on-ball and off-ball responsibilities. Fred VanVleet has one more guaranteed year under his contract. He signed a 2+1 last offseason. Obviously, that final year is a team option. So Houston should be setting themselves up for life after VanVleet. I know he just got there. It seems crazy to say that. But given what we've seen from Amen Thompson, Jalen Green's had some awesome moments. He's also had some low moments. We don't really exactly know what he is fully yet, but I think we've seen some real positives that probably has led Houston fans to believing in him quite a bit more than they were maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And then you have Sheppard. With those three as your long-term backcourt, next to Alperen Şengün, next to Dillon Brooks, next to Jabari Smith, next to Tari Eason, next to Steven Adams, who I think is a super underrated get for this team, and I think is going to help them a lot next season. This Rockets team is going to keep getting better. Remember, before the year I said, this team's a lot better than everyone else expects. And I think they showed that. They finished as the 11th seed, kind of a disappointing end to the season, but they really heated up down the stretch and found their identity, found their culture, and found their play style that they wanted to roll with. And I think Sheppard amplifies all of those things and more. Pick number 10, we move on to the Atlanta Hawks, who are in the play-in. That's a huge part of this mock draft. Remember, I'm recording this the night that the regular season ended, so the play-in is still going to happen. This order might change and shift a little bit. We're going to get to weekly mock drafts, so new content's going to be coming out all the time. Make sure you guys are subscribed for that. Don't miss out on any of that. But Atlanta, what a weird situation. We'll see what happens when it's all said and done with DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. But 10th overall here, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Donovan Clingan out of UConn. You might say, whoa, they have Clint Capella, they have Onyeka Okongwu. Why are you drafting a center? For a long time, I've been saying, if you want to draft a center, you have to draft him a year before you really need him. Derek Lively's been an awesome center this year for Dallas. I still think once Daniel Gafford got there, Dallas got even better. And the reason for that is just the maturity, the understanding of what you're trying to accomplish defensively. It takes time and it takes experience. So getting Donovan Clingan reps while you still have Capella, while you still have Okongwu, isn't a bad idea. And he might just end up being flat out better than both of those guys because he's a huge body at 7'1". We saw how he impacted Zaccharie in the national championship game, but he did that all year long. He was in the top, I think he was 99th percentile as a post defender, which is insane. He blocked a ton of shots this past year for UConn. One big concern with him, I think, is the stamina. How long can he go at times playing? In the NBA game, it's going to test him a bit. So I think he's got to get his endurance up. He's got to get into better shape, but he's a phenomenal screen setter. He's set a ton of screens at his time at UConn, both on the ball and off the ball. Think back to last year with Jordan Hawkins. He's just got a pro center game. I think looking at him and a comparison for him, I think he's a better Steven Adams. I think he could be maybe a better Walker Kessler is another good example. He's a good NBA center. I think you're looking at a guy, you're drafting him, you're probably going to get a top 15, top 17 center here, probably on the low end. That's kind of like where his floor lies with for me. So getting him 10th overall here, even though it's not the most immediate need for Atlanta, I think given the questions on their roster right now and really the direction they're headed, taking someone who in a year or two from now could be your starting center is probably the best idea at this spot of the draft. Clingan checks off those boxes and more for me here, 10th overall. Moving on to pick 11, we have the Chicago Bulls, another play-in team. Obviously, my spiel from before applies to them here. But 11th overall, I have the Bulls selecting Dalton Knecht out of Tennessee. Just an elite shooter, someone who really does a lot off of the basketball. And now at Tennessee, one thing is they asked him to do a lot with the basketball. And I think that was really good for his development. Now, I know people are going to say, oh my gosh, he's 23 years old on the night of the draft, this, that, and the... I don't really care, okay? He's a good player. He shoots the ball extremely well. He ranks in the upper echelons percentile-wise as a catch-and-shoot shooter. He's really great in transition. And I think his on-ball role that he had at Tennessee where he was looking to create shots, I think that's going to be really beneficial for him once he gets into the NBA and making things happen in short bursts of time. He's not going to be the focal point of an offense. He's going to be an ancillary piece, which is great because his experience in college as a main shot creator, a primary go-to guy, is going to allow him in opportunities where he catches the ball with 4 seconds on the shot clock and the immediate catch and shoot's not there, he's comfortable putting a dribble or two down and getting off his own look. It's not going to happen all the time. It's not going to be Chicago's main style of playing, but it's beneficial around other players, having guys who are capable of doing more than you're asking them to. That's exactly what you want. And I think 11th overall here, you get him on a cheap rookie contract. He's going to enter his prime on his rookie deal. You're going to get him on a cheap second contract. And all of a sudden you had him for his ages 23 through 31 seasons where he's really at the peak of his powers, and you had him playing for really close to nothing, especially with the new CBA. This gives Chicago some good flexibility going into their kind of retooling, rebuild, whatever you want to call it. I think this makes a good deal of sense for Chicago. Pick number 12, the Oklahoma City Thunder here at this spot. This pick comes from the Houston Rockets, from the Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook swap over a half decade ago now. At this point, crazy how some of these picks just seemingly like it takes so long to get to, but the Thunder are here now. And with this pick, the Oklahoma City Thunder select Jared McCain out of Duke. And I know Thunder fans are already typing in the comment section saying, we don't want another guard, we don't. Well, hear me out first, okay? This is what Sam Presti likes to do. And I think Jared McCain would be an excellent pick, actually, for Oklahoma City for a few reasons. So last year they took Cason Wallace. Really good selection. I think he had a fantastic rookie season. He was an impactful player, contributed to winning. A big part of why Oklahoma City is the 1 seed is because they have a lot of players similar to a Jared McCain or Cason Wallace who are capable of doing a bunch of different things. Jared McCain, for me, just like I talked about with Reed Sheppard, a guy who can toggle between on-ball and off-ball responsibilities. And the more players you have like that, the better, because they can play off of each other. You build this unique chemistry compared to what we see in, like, say, Dallas, where Doncic is primarily an on-ball player, so then the rest of the team has off-ball guys. OKC has a collection of players who are able to play make, create, and it generates a lot of open looks so that OKC shoots the ball extremely well as a byproduct of their ball movement. Now you insert Jared McCain, you're getting a lethal shooter, one of the best shooters in this draft class. He shoots the ball extremely well, both off the dribble and off the catch. I think that's something that's going to be really pivotal for OKC, is just implementing and infusing a little bit more shooting with the group. And I think the big question is, after this playoffs, will Josh Giddey still be on the Oklahoma City Thunder? There's been a lot of noise and there's been some smoke, and anytime there's smoke, you have to wonder if there's fire. Now, I'm not reporting anything firm here. I'm not saying, oh, Josh Giddey's getting traded. But again, drafting Jared McCain here makes sense. Now, I also considered bigger fours. I looked at, maybe Kyle Filipowski, Tidjane, Salaun. Those guys make some sense for OKC, but the way that Sam Presti is operated doesn't really suggest that that's the way he's going to go. So for me, I think Jared McCain is the most likely pick here at number 12. Moving on to pick number 13, we have the Sacramento Kings. Remember, this pick is protected in the lottery. They would owe it to Atlanta normally, but they're back into the play-in. And this could be a weird situation for Sacramento where it kind of mucks up their flexibility. They were supposed to convey this pick this year and go into this offseason with all of their picks back in their kind of asset collection to trade and to work with. So we'll see what Sacramento does here. It's an interesting situation for them. I could see them trading out of this spot. I could also see them trying to trade up from this spot. So it's a unique spot for them. But 13th overall, I have them going with center Kel'el Ware out of Indiana. And this is a very interesting selection. Blocks a ton of shots, super athletic. I like Kel'el Ware as a prospect a lot. He was an extremely productive post-up scorer for Indiana, which is a main part of Hoosiers basketball. Think back to Trace Jackson Davis a year ago. I think Kel'el Ware is just a player who's going to come into the league. He's going to be extremely productive. Sacramento's been playing JaVale McGee a lot as a backup center. They also have Trey Lyles. I think Kel'el Ware gives you fresher legs, someone who's at this point of his career more vertically explosive than JaVale is. JaVale is one of the most athletic players in the NBA ever because of what he was capable of doing as a youngster. But Kel'el Ware gives you some of that vertical pop, that bounce around Sabonis if you want to ever play the two of them together, although I wouldn't really recommend that a ton for their offense. But I think he could turn into a really good DHO user himself at some point. He's got the athleticism to play that style as a roll man after handing the basketball off. So I think some technical work with him early in building up how you want him to handle the ball, how you want him to play out a DHO and in delay action. And I think with that, Kel'el Ware could be a really unique pickup while still providing Sacramento some good rim protection off the bench early in his career. Moving on to pick 14, we're back to the Portland Trailblazers. Remember, I talked about them earlier and how important it is for them to get these picks right. Well, 14, they have a chance here to add some shooting. We didn't do that as much with Cody Williams at 3. 14, we will with Jacoby Walter out of Baylor. This guy is a pure shooter. Now, his field goal percentage looks really poor this year, but it's because he lives off of three-point shots. He lives off of a deep range shot diet. And for Portland, I think everything I thought while watching them, is if they have floor spacing, I think Scoot Henderson's going to be able to knife through defenses, and I think Scoot Henderson has really shown very good passing capabilities at the NBA level. I think he's smart. I think he understands what he's supposed to do, and I think it's just about having the right talent around him. Jacoby Walter is a pick that makes Scoot's life easier. Having one more shooter on the floor, one more guy who's looking for his three-point shot, you can probably run him in through some ghost actions and some slip screens. Jacoby Walter gives you a few different unique play sets that you can run into as well, which I think is important. If you're building out a roster, you need to have functional play styles that work together and play together, and I think Walter plus Scoot is a pretty good pairing. Obviously, the Blazers still have Sharp and Simon, so their guard kind of backcourt is getting kind of full, but I think you can fit in Walter because of his shooting touch, and I think he's able to play around any of those guys going forward. Outside of the lottery now, we're on to the Miami Heat, who we'll see what happens in the play-in, but don't discount Miami. They're always a dangerous team, and we'll see what happens with them because who knows, maybe they can make a run like they did last year. But 15th overall, I have the Miami Heat selecting guard Devin Carter out of Providence. I thought a lot about this pick. For those of you who don't know, my mocks take me hours and hours and hours and hours to put together, and then it takes me an hour something to record and an hour something plus to edit at least. A lot of time goes into these mocks, so I hope you guys do enjoy. But I really sat and thought about this one. This is one that I was like, I need to get this one right for Miami because they're at a pivotal point in their franchise. Jimmy Butler's into his 30s. Bam Adebayo is a key franchise cornerstone piece that they're going to want to continue winning with. Jaime Jaquez was a great selection for them last year. And I thought a player who just kind of fit into that Heat culture was Devin Carter out of Providence. He had a great two-way season this past year. He's a defensive playmaker, blocks some shots as a guard. He does a good job riding players' hips. And then offensively, he does a lot of different things. He plays off of his own shot creation diet. He played off of the ball as well at a pretty good clip. So for me, with his ability to shoot the basketball, make plays all over the court, I think he's a unique fit next to Jimmy Butler right now in the present day. As a junior coming out of college, I think he's ready to contribute NBA minutes as well. But then when it comes to post Jimmy, I think this is a guy who can probably assume more of that on-ball capability, that on-ball role. And I think Miami, you need to kind of find a balance between the two right now where you're trying to push your chips toward winning, but you also want good players who are going to help you long term. They thread that needle last year with Jaime Jaquez, and I think they're going to be capable of doing it again this year, taking Devin Carter right outside of the lottery. Pick 16, the Orlando Magic here. Every time I say Orlando Magic, I swear I get the TikTok theme song stuck in my head, but Orlando is in a great spot. Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner, I think both coming off of pretty good seasons. I know Franz Wagner didn't shoot the ball super well this year. I'm not too concerned about that. I think he improved in a lot of other key areas. Jalen Suggs really made a name for himself defensively. Jonathan Isaac, again, proved to be the best per-minute defender in the entire NBA, I think, with his play this past year. And they've got playoff basketball ahead of them as a 5 seed, so huge congratulations to Orlando for that. And with this pick, I have them selecting Tidjane Salaun out of Cholet. This is an interesting long-term upside pick for Orlando. This isn't a pick that comes in and helps you probably win 5-10 more games next year, but with how Orlando has operated, it doesn't seem like they're really rushing into anything. They had a chance last offseason to improve the team in free agency or via trade. They did not opt that way. We'll see if they do this year. Another interesting situation to watch. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but a player like Salaun does make a lot of sense for their draft history. They tend to value players with a lot of size, length, and then some shooting upside rather than true shooting talent. If you look at Orlando, they typically prefer guys with length and defensive acumen, and that's really built out into their team identity around Jamal Mosley. The team can guard. They're a really great defensive team. I think Salaun has unique defensive traits that are going to make him a good NBA player at some point down the road. And the real question for him is how well does he shoot the ball? Sounds like a scouting report in the Orlando Magic period. So I think Salaun, just from a, hey, what would Orlando do at this spot of the draft, makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are a little bit higher on Salaun than I am. A lot of others see him as a for sure, no doubt lottery pick. I'm a little unsure on that. I have him right outside the lottery here, 16th overall though, to Orlando. Moving on to pick 17, we have the Toronto Raptors. This pick comes from the Indiana Pacers from the Pascal Siakam trade, the first of 3 picks to convey. Obviously, Toronto rerouted one of them already, But here the Raptors are with this selection, and 17th overall, I have them selecting Isaiah Collier out of USC. And I know some people are probably commenting right now, whoa, Collier fell quite a bit in this mock draft. For me, I have a real issue with the way that he defends. He just did not apply himself defensively at USC. Now maybe when he gets into the NBA, maybe he takes on that challenge a little bit more, especially when it comes to how many minutes is he going to play. As if he's not trying defensively, well, he's not going to play very many minutes. And I know Darko is the type of coach to hold him to that. This is the right guy there in Toronto to hold players accountable. He's done that all season long. Pretty much from the moment he arrived, actually, even during training camp and beforehand, media day, all of that. He doesn't play games. So I think if there's a coach that's going to get Collier to kind of buy in and realize that defense is super important, it would be there in Toronto. And I think there's a lot of talent to work with here. He's a shot creation expert. He generates advantages, can get downhill in a hurry. He's got a really good first step, and he's got the floor vision to play off of that. I think some of the question is, how reliable does his jump shot become? And then defensively, is he ever capable of guarding point guards? And if the answer is no, then you're trying to use a 6'3" guard to guard 2s and 3s in this league, depending on your matchups, and you're undersized, and you're going to be kind of in a world of hurt in some ways. So I think Collier, a player that the highlights suggest should be a lottery pick or a top 10 pick. For me, I'm a little bit lower on him right now just because I've got some questions about how he's going to translate to the league. I think he's going to have a really rough rookie season, if I'm being honest with you, because he's a guard who is very much rim presence based. We saw some of Scoot Henderson's struggles with that his rookie season, and I think Collier's a worse prospect. By far a worse prospect. So I think there's a lot of questions for me right now, but I do understand some of the upside and intrigue, and that's why he still stays in the top 20 here in my mock draft. Pick number 18, the Los Angeles Lakers here now. This pick, there's an asterisk by the Lakers' name on the graphic. The reason for that is because the New Orleans Pelicans have a possible option to take this pick or to defer to next year. There's been reports saying they'll defer to next year, and with the Lakers likely making the playoffs, my assumption is that the Pelicans will definitely defer to next season, where LeBron James potentially would no longer be with the Lakers. There's a lot of rumors right now in Titletown, of course, about LeBron's future there. He has a player option. Will he accept it? Will he decline and go into free agency? Who knows, really? But the Lakers, pick 18 here, have the option to draft Johnny Furphy out of Kansas. Furphy is a quality prospect and the type of prospect you would want to put next to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. The Lakers just don't shoot the ball very well, and Furphy ranked in the 84th percentile, I believe, as a catch-and-shoot three-point shooter this past year. Extremely valuable for Kansas, but the other thing that he does really well that I think's been really under the radar, he's an excellent play finisher as well. He gets to the rim and finishes at the rim. Now, he doesn't do a lot of that off of self-creation, but he's been a somewhat active cutter. He's very good in transition. I think all of those things fit LA, and especially fit playing off of LeBron James, D'Angelo Russell, and external to Anthony Davis on the offensive end. So Furphy, the real big question with him is, how does he guard at the NBA level? The answer to that is not very well early in his career, I'm sure. But I think he's got the length, the size, and the athletic traits to at least develop into a league average defender. So if you're looking at LA here with an option to draft somebody last year, remember this same kind of range, they took Jalen Hood-Schifino. I think Furphy's a little bit more of a player who fits into what they actually need around LeBron, whereas Hood-Schifino really hasn't given them a ton this season. Even though I like Hood-Schifino, I think there's some things he could still blossom into in the NBA. Furphy's a more pro-ready player off of the basketball, which I think makes sense if you're trying to retain LeBron James this summer. Pick number 19, the Philadelphia 76ers here now, and with this pick, the 76ers could either trade it, which I think is a real possibility, or they're going to look for a contributor who can help them win games and do it on a really cheap rookie contract. That player here is Kyle Filipowski for the 76ers. I think one thing that they've been looking for a long time is a quality backup big man behind Joel Embiid. Remember the Al Horford contract, remember Andre Drummond's tenure there. The 76ers have been looking and hunting. It kind of gives me vibes back to, Greg Monroe back in the day. Like, the Sixers have had a lot of different big bodies in there, and I think Filipowski's a very different story than a lot of those other ones because he actually fits as a four-man next to Joel Embiid in certain lineups with Filipowski's ability to handle play at the top of the key, work into handoffs. He's very comfortable with the basketball in his hands. He's someone who can probably coexist next to Embiid in certain lineups, but at the same time, probably fits behind him as well. It could give them a unique spacing option. Now, I know Filipowski hasn't hit on a ton of his three-pointers at the collegiate level yet, but I think there's a lot of, positives to work with. Even though his production hasn't been always there, I think the volume has been encouraging, and I think his shot mechanics actually look pretty telling that he's going to be able to grow into a quality shooter at some point down the road. My kind of comp for Kyle Filipowski is Kelly Olynyk. I think the two of them play rather similarly. Olynyk a little bit probably more athletic, but Filipowski a little bit bigger. So with that, I think Philadelphia here gets a player who can help them play behind Joel Embiid. Obviously, yes, I know they have B-Ball Paul. I'm sure some 76ers fans have already commented that because I didn't mention it right off the top. I think Filipowski can coexist next to either of them. I think you can play unique lineups. I think if Embiid's out, you move Reed into the starting lineup where he's been awesome this year and flips your backup center behind that even. So Filipowski, unique big man, I think can help them play around their other existing bigs, especially Joel Embiid. Pick number 20, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers here now at this spot. This playoffs will be very telling for the future of the Cavaliers, specifically Donovan Mitchell in the wine and gold. But with this pick, I have the Cavs selecting Justin Edwards out of Kentucky. Last year, they selected Amani Bates in the second round. I really like that pickup for them. He shot the ball extremely well this year with the G League program, the Canton Charge. And I think when you look at Edwards, people are going to point to some of his flaws, the reliability of his shooting, the playmaking capability. He hasn't really flashed a ton of that, but he's extremely athletic, and his catch and shoot numbers actually suggested he ranked pretty well compared to, I think, where I was expecting him to finish based on his early season play. The analytics actually suggest he's going to turn into a pretty quality 3-and-D wing. Now, there's a long ways to go to get there, but I think for Cleveland, something they've been looking for a while, just improved depth and reliability off the wing. Now, obviously they made big signings of George Niang, Max Strus. That helped a lot, but I still think getting one more body in there, Justin Edwards, long-term, he could be a player who blossoms and grows into what you're really hoping for from that small forward position. Isaac Okoro's been great this year for Cleveland as well, but getting one more wing, one more big, long, lengthy, athletic body. Every single NBA GM dreams about adding wings that can do things off the dribble and catch and score. Justin Edwards has those traits and is a player who could definitely grow in Cleveland in his career early on. Pick 21, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks, as New Orleans actually has a swap option with Milwaukee. Don't worry, you're going to see Milwaukee really soon here, right around the corner. 21st overall, though, I have the Pelicans selecting Daron Holmes II out of Dayton, and I'm not sure if there's a pick I like more in this draft. For those of you who do not know, Coach Grant there at Dayton runs a continuity ball screen offense. As a benefactor of that, Daron Holmes was extremely productive and has a lot of on-ball reps as a screener. Really, really good. Now you translate that to New Orleans, who runs a zoom action, and Holmes, I think, has some traits that were underexplored at Dayton. His ability to handle the ball, his ability to create shots, his ability to pass are all things that I think can grow in an NBA offense with more spacing, better pacing around him. I think that there's going to be a lot of unique plays that he's going to be able to create in New Orleans zoom offense with Borrego, obviously, as the offensive coordinator there. And then looking at, Willie Green as the head coach, I think Holmes is a perfect fit as Valanciunas and Nance kind of start to age out of the league at some point in the next couple of years. Holmes would really assume a lot of the responsibilities as the primary center, and he can be a dynamic screen and roll big, screen and pop big. He does a little bit of both. So you're looking at a player who I think could open up the floor quite a bit for New Orleans. I think he's a better long-term big than Jonas Valanciunas. I think his skill set fits rather differently than what Valanciunas currently gives New Orleans. And for that reason, I think Holmes is a great pickup here, 21st overall. Moving on now to pick number 22, we're taking a look at those Milwaukee Bucks. Just like I promised, this pick comes from the New Orleans Pelicans in that swap. And I have them selecting Dillon Jones out of Weber State. Yes, that's right, another Weber State player in Milwaukee, obviously traded for Damian Lillard last offseason. We'll see how that all ends for Milwaukee. I'm not sure how I feel about their future, but I think if they're going to try and win, they got to draft a player who's ready to help them try and win. And Dillon Jones checks off those boxes. A high volume rebounder this year as a 6'6" wing, capable of creating his shot off the dribble. Although you look at his frame, body, physicality, those are all things that I think can translate to an off-ball role, a defensive-minded role, a rebounding role, and it gives Milwaukee the ability to maybe lean into more Giannis at center minutes, with Jones kind of being one of your wings and maybe Andre Jackson or Marjon Beauchamp being another wing. You can play an athletic, big, fast lineup around Giannis and Dame at point guard center as the bookends. I think that's something that opens up some real possibilities for Milwaukee moving forward, as Brook Lopez's drop coverage has looked a little exposed this year without Drew Holiday as the point of attack screen navigator there in Milwaukee. Pick 23, we are now talking about the Phoenix Suns, who probably will trade this pick, hashtag Matt Ishbia. But if they don't, who would they look to take? And I think for Phoenix, it's about getting more talent in the door and players who fit their current supporting cast, and that's Yves Missi here from Baylor. He is a player who I thought, like, in theory, I'd say, oh, he's a lock to go top 20. In this mock, he actually fell down to 23 for me just because there's a few teams that I didn't think would look to utilize his skill set, and I think he's still very raw. If you look at his pick and roll defense numbers this year for Baylor, and the film suggests this as well, just, I think, out of position a little too frequently, and because of that, teams found a good deal of success attacking Missi in the pick and roll, but there's a lot of traits and a lot of tools to work with, and if there's a coach in the NBA that I trust to develop a center defensively, it's Frank Vogel. Think about all the success he's found as a head coach with defensive-minded centers. Think back to Roy Hibbert in Indiana. Think about what he did in LA with Dwight Howard playing next to Anthony Davis, kind of making some big lineups work. I think he's mustered up a competitive defense there in Phoenix with Jusuf Nurkic, which is something that I thought was going to be a challenging ask for him coming into the year. But Phoenix looks like a dangerous team heading into the playoffs, and getting Yves Missi, even though he's a developmental project, I think Frank Vogel is one of the best coaches in the league at developing defensive centers, and I think Missi could be a guy who kind of blossoms under his tutelage. Pick 24, we've got the New York Knicks here. This pick comes from the Dallas Mavericks. This is the final asset from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and if they actually draft someone here with this pick, it'll be the only thing that they have from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, because no other player on their roster for the last 3 years has come from that trade. They just haven't had anything from it other than this pick that they've been waiting for. They finally get it here, 24th overall, and I have them selecting AJ Mitchell out of UC Santa Barbara, and I really like this kid's game. He's got a smooth stroke. He's someone who's able to knock down perimeter shots. Now, he hasn't done it at a super high clip, but I think there's going to be more coming from him when he's not a full-on self-creation player, and when he's able to play off of some better screeners, better shot creators around him. I think it's going to open up the game for him a bit, and he plays really, really well off of 2 feet. He's crafty, plays below the rim predominantly, but he's someone who's able to open up just enough wiggle room with ball fakes and footwork, pivoting in the post. He's a player that I believe in, with his ability to dribble, pass, shoot. That's something last year I preached with Brandon Podziemski the entire draft process. I said, look, Podziemski can dribble, pass, shoot. When you have a skill set guy who can do all of those things and is productive with them, there's a lot to believe in. And I think AJ Mitchell kind of fits right into that category as well. A player who I like. I think he's going to end up really growing well. And for New York specifically, I don't think there's a better place for him to land than learning under Jalen Brunson for the first couple of years of his career, and really just kind of developing and maturing his game to a point where he becomes, I think, a high-quality player in the NBA down the road. Pick 25, we stayed with the New York Knicks, and we're going with Ryan Dunn here for them at this spot. Back-to-back selections, and I think Ryan Dunn is a player Knicks fans probably just got up and screamed, whether you're at work or at home. You're probably up cheering right now because this is a Tom Thibodeau player. He guards. He really, really guards. He is one of the freakiest defensive players I've ever evaluated for a few reasons. First of all, if you look at his stocks numbers, you're going to say, oh my gosh, over 2 blocks a game, over a steal and a half per game. Wow, this guy's making plays. But he's way more than a defensive playmaker. And that's what really impresses me, is he's got defensive playmaking numbers, but he doesn't sacrifice his positioning to make defensive plays. He doesn't reach and gamble. He doesn't jump out of the way for block opportunities. He guards. He sits down, and he guards. Now, offensively, he's really, really raw. He cannot shoot the ball worth a lick. He can't really dribble, and he definitely can't pass. So you might be saying, oh my gosh, why are we taking this guy in the first round? If you haven't watched him, I totally understand. He cuts. He cuts really, really well. He finishes at the rim extremely well. He's an extremely athletic, uber athletic wing who right now, he's no 3 and D. He can't shoot a three-pointer, but he can back cut. He can play in transition. And I think if there's one skill set that I believe you can develop going into the NBA, shooting is probably number one. I think a great example is Dorian Finney-Smith came into the league out of Florida, incapable of shooting the basketball. After a lot of reps, a lot of time, and a lot of patience, he became not only a good shooter, like a very good shooter, a very dangerous shooter, especially out of the corner. And that's where Ryan Dunn's going to mostly play offensively. And he could become this unique on-ball, off-ball defensive weapon for Tom Thibodeau. Again, the Knicks don't have to rush these guys in. They'd have time to sit, let them kind of play in the G League, let them sit and watch and learn and use practice time to develop them. And then down the road, that's where you're going to see them hopefully get some real run and a real opportunity. I think Ryan Dunn, a player I believe in big time, and I think Tom Thibodeau would as well. Moving on to pick number 26, we have the Washington Wizards here, their second pick in this first round. Remember, earlier we went with Alex Sarr to really build up the defensive identity, but here we're going to look for a shot creator and a shot generator, someone who can impact the games in more ways than one, and that is Carlton Carrington out of Pitt. Bub is what he goes by as a nickname, but he's kind of a bucket. Now, the three-point shot isn't there yet, so this is another development pick. He's not going to really give you positive minutes in year 1 or 2 of his career probably, but there are traits to like about him. First of all, he's productive. He gets on the glass as a guard. At 6'5", he's got the length and the size, he's got the wingspan, and then he's also a productive playmaker. He facilitates the basketball. He was running the offense for Pittsburgh this past year and finding success. His very first college game, he posted a triple-double, and he's been productive outside of that as well all season long. And then when it comes to his scoring, I think the one thing that gives me hope for him developing into a good NBA player at some point, he was a really productive mid-range shooter. Now, that's the least efficient shot in the NBA right now. He doesn't get to the rim a ton. He doesn't make a ton of threes. So, again, it's a development pick. He's not going to be ready to really contribute to winning ways early in his career. That's okay for Washington. But for me, a comp for him, he's kind of got shades of DeJounte Murray. Plays a similar style now defensively. I don't think he's going to be as good as DeJounte has been at times in his career, especially when DeJounte's locked in. But I think the offensive game, the mid-range pull-up is going to be there. The creation for others is going to be there, probably to a little bit of a lesser extent. But I think that's the hope. DeJounte Murray was picked very late in his first round, and I think if you're taking Carlton Carrington, you're going to be patient with him, you're going to wait for him, you're going to let him grow and develop as a player, and maybe he becomes a good creation piece for the Wizards offense in the next couple of years. Pick 27, we're on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Kind of a disappointing end of the year for them. They went from potentially being the 1 seed to falling all the way down to the 3 seed and having to face the Phoenix Suns in the first round of the playoffs. It would be a real disaster for Minnesota if they lose in the first round. Given their franchise context and history, it would be a real letdown based on the season that they've had. But 27th overall, here they have an opportunity to add more talent. Tim Connolly's a really smart guy, drafts extremely well. And here I have them selecting Keyshawn George out of Miami. George has shot the ball extremely well, standing about 6'8", shooting over 40% from 3 as a freshman at Miami. Those kind of traits and productive skills that he has shown is huge. Now, he hasn't done a ton off the dribble yet, but I think for Minnesota, one of their big advantages with the way that their roster is built is they're huge. They've got a lot of length and size. Keyshawn George fits that profile, and they also have shot the ball extremely well off of drive and kick action, off of generating open looks for each other with a bevy of playmakers on the floor. And George, I think, is a player who could be benefited by playing next to a Nickeil Alexander-Walker, next to a Mike Conley, next to Monte Morris, assuming he's back in Minnesota next year. Keyshawn George is the type of player who he's probably not going to play a ton in year 1 anyway, but assuming he's playing off of other guys who can play, make, and create, George is the type of player who can thrive off of those surrounding skill sets. Moving on to pick number 28, we have a shakeup here. The Denver Nuggets select center Zach Edey out of Purdue. And this is a big-time shakeup for Denver, a team that just won the NBA Finals last year. There's a really good shot they make it back there again this season and win it again this season. You might be saying, wait, they have Nikola Jokic. Why would they take Zach Edey? You look at what Denver has done recently, what Calvin Booth has done recently. He has valued good college players. He took Christian Brown, very good college player. He took Peyton Watson, not a good college player at all. But he's also taken Hunter Tyson, Julian Strawther, good college players. He's taken veterans coming out of college who are ready to help impact winning. And Zach Edey might be the most ultimate example of this. Dominant college player, 2-time AP Player of the Year. You're looking at a player who, behind Nikola Jokic, can he give you 10, 15 minutes a night where all of a sudden you have this unique 7'4" big who you'd feed in the post, uses as a pick and roll man. That's the one kind of understanding on Edey right now. His most efficient play style is not post-ups. He's a dominant screen and roll big. That's how he's got to be used because he's got excellent hands. He rolls extremely hard and you can throw the ball up in the air, and he's mobile enough, athletic enough to go up and catch the basketball above the air. Now defensively, he's got some struggles when it comes to his actual mobility, lateral mobility. You're going to bleed some points with him on the floor, but I think given his profile, if you're going to justify picking Zach Edey in the first round, there's really only 2 or 3 teams that I could see really having a good justification for doing so. I think Denver is one of those teams, and I think it does make a good deal of sense to draft a big behind Nikola Jokic so you don't have to worry about that backup center spot for a while, and you're getting a player on a cheap rookie contract. Moving on to pick 29, we have the Utah Jazz here yet again. They own this pick from the Thunder through the Raptors in the Kel'el trade, and now 29th overall. They've got the opportunity here to add a little bit more talent and some upside, and that's exactly what they're doing with Tyler Smith out of G League Ignite. This just feels like a Danny Ainge selection, someone with some upside, extremely athletic. If I had to give a comparison for him, he reminds me of Houston Rockets' Terrence Jones. Back from about a decade or so ago. Someone, I think it might just be the left-handed thing, but he plays above the rim. He's got an emerging mid-range jump shot. I think the big question for him, just like it was with Terrence Jones, what does the three-point shot look like? Does he develop a better perimeter outside game? Can he play within a system? For me, this is the type of player I stray away from. I don't love guys who I kind of pigeonhole as true fours. Don't really see him ever playing small forward. I'm not sure if he can really thrive as a small ball center, but the hope is that he can, and that he can become productive enough to open up your offense in ways that right now you're maybe not going to get. So Utah, they don't have real minutes to give Tyler Smith yet, but this would be a stash and development type of pick, one that they would allow to kind of grow, and they'd project and wait and see what they've got with him here 29th overall at this spot of the draft. Then the final pick here of the first round, and that is the Boston Celtics. I'm super excited for this one here with Boston because I think this is a player who could really blossom, no pun intended, for Boston this upcoming couple of years, and that is Trenton Flowers out of Adelaide, playing for the Adelaide 36ers this past year. He just declared for the draft on his Twitter just the other day. And he's a really good kid with a lot of athleticism. And that's really what you're looking at here from a projectable development standpoint for Boston. What are you looking at here? It is a player who stands at about 6'9" with some point guard skills. He's not a point guard. He's more of a point forward if he ever becomes that. But he's got some ability to handle. He can push and transition. He can be a unique connector piece. And he's extremely tall, lengthy, athletic. He jumps extremely well. He runs the floor well. He needs some time to grow and mature and develop as a basketball player, for sure. But he's had moments, especially one game this year. He scored 18 fourth quarter points for Adelaide, completely took over a game and won it for them. There's a lot to work with. There's a lot of tools to work with. I'm a big believer in his game because I think he is an NBA quality player at some point. I think there's some meaningful development he needs to take forward, especially as a jump shooter. But he shot the ball extremely well off of catch and shoots this year at times for the 36ers. And I think for Boston, if you're looking at getting young, developable talent, Trenton Flowers is a guy who makes a lot of sense. I think he's going to fit their timeline when you need him to be ready to really play. I think him, Jordan Walsh, and a few other young pieces could be able to blossom and grow into quality role players, quality pieces around Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, for a couple of years from now, when the CBA starts to really, I think, get punitive on Boston, having some of these young guys ready to roll is going to be extremely important for the Celtics moving forward. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more content. Remember, Mock Draft Monday. We got mocks coming all the time now, so this is the place you want to be. Thanks again so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.